we'll see how it goes. Another reminder for the candidates and the panelists, it's not rude. It's human nature, I know, to speak to the person you're talking to, but tonight we're speaking to the camera. And it also helps you enunciate to the thing. And Carlos and Debbie, you can take your masks off now. You are socially distanced, if you please, or if you want. I think with that, Debbie, why don't you introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. I'm so happy to be back here with all of you tonight. I am your Congresswoman, Debbie Mucarsel-Powell, representing all of you, Florida's 26th District, and I hope to earn your support once again. Thank you.
Carlos?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Carlos Gimenez. I am the mayor of Miami-Dade County, and I hope to be your representative in Congress in Florida District number 26. And again, thank you for having us here today.
Thank you guys both for being here. It means a lot to us and to the audience. So, last time, and Clint, give us, as we build up on viewers, last time we had at least 200 online viewers, which is usually a family or a group of people, and we're on both the county television stations, so this should be a pretty big audience. So let's go right to it. Mandy, why don't you start us off?
Okay.
Forward. And again, the panelists can ask either of you a question, both of you a question, and just because they ask one doesn't necessarily mean the other one gets the answer unless we let them set the tone. I have veto power. I've only used it probably 2 or 3 times in 15 years, and that's just when did you stop beating?
Why are you only looking at me? I'm always very well behaved. He's like looking at me on the. Yeah.
There was nothing intended. So, Mandy.
Okay. First question is for the Congresswoman. Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
You have recently said that your initials DMP stand for Don't Mess With My People.
That's right.
As a female South American Democrat representing a largely Cuban American district that includes Republicans largely in the Upper Keys, Democrats here down here in Key West, who are your people and who are not your people?
When I say don't mess with my people, I mean every single person that I represent in Florida's 26th District. I'm talking about the families that are fighting to get better access to health care. I'm talking about the fishermen that have been struggling in their business, not just because of COVID, but because of tariffs that have been imposed by this president on their exports on spiny lobster. I'm talking about the children that have had to go to school to practice in school the shooter drills, that parents are extremely concerned because of the gun violence epidemic. Every person, whether Republican, Democrat, Independent, I have always had their voices with me in Washington, D.C., and those are my people.
So there's nobody that isn't your people?
No.
Okay.
No.
Tim.
And this is sorry, I meant to look this way. This is for both of you guys. We ran a story this weekend about, I had received several reports from commercial fishermen in the past year about an increase in boarding of their commercial vessels. And mainly when these guys are being boarded, they're mainly being targeted for having immigrant workers, some of them obviously undocumented, but these guys are telling me that they have been boarded sometimes 6-8 hours at a time, taking up most of their day. Some guys didn't get back till 10:30. It doesn't seem like they're focusing on marine safety issues, but on migrant issues. I want to know from you guys is this the best use of the Coast Guard's resources, limited resources, given how much space they have to patrol out there? And also, does this go does this need to be addressed in some of our migrant worker bills that would allow, to make it easier for guys like commercial fishermen to sponsor some of these guys and come and work in our country? Because one guy was working here for 20 years, had 2 daughters here, and he was recently deported. And the guy who
let's let them.
All right, but he called him a very honorable, hardworking guy, his boss. So,
Carlos, why don't you take that?
Well, I think we need comprehensive immigration reform. People should be allowed to come out of the shadows. I do believe in border security, but we have, 11, 12 million undocumented immigrants here in the United States. It's a physical impossibility to try to deport them, and there is no reason to. They're embedded in our economy, and so as a congressperson, as a congressman, I would look forward to having a comprehensive immigration reform to put this issue to bed once and for all, which means that if you have been here for a certain period of time and you can document that, you can come out of the shadows. You should be given a work permit, and then you go. You don't have to physically go back to your country of origin, but you should go into the back of the line of your country of origin for immigration status as far as citizenship is concerned. And if you get there, great. And if you don't get there, but at least come out of the shadows, pay taxes, and they've been productive members of our society. And so I believe in comprehensive immigration reform.
Tim, thank you for that question. Look, the Coast Guard has been struggling with lack of investments on their infrastructure. Their stations are falling apart. So one of the things that I did is introduce a bill, a bipartisan bill, that would provide significant funding to fix the maintenance backlog that they've seen for many years. Now, they, what they're doing is making it much more difficult for fishermen to do their work, right? And this is typical coming from the Trump administration that is targeting immigrants. And my opponent actually was the first and only mayor that right after Donald Trump threatened with not giving funding for cities that had a sanctuary status, he was the first and only mayor in the entire country that followed that line following Donald Trump. He enthusiastically supports a president that is completely against any immigration reform. We passed in the Judiciary Committee a bill that would provide a path to our dreamers, a clean bill that we know how many dreamers we have in South Florida. We have tens of thousands of dreamers. Many of them are teachers, many of them are nurses. We passed this bill a year ago, and the Republicans in the Senate refused to even have a debate on the bill. They refused to bring that bill on the floor. There's no immigration reform under a Republican-led Senate or a Republican-led administration. The president has made it very clear that he is not interested in immigration reform. We heard the same thing from Carlos Curbelo when he had the seat. He wanted immigration reform. I think they presented 2 or 3 bills. The Republicans can't even agree on what that looks like. So, yes, we do, Carlos, need immigration reform. Unfortunately, your party is not interested in doing that.
Carlos, you get to respond.
Oh, I would
We
love
made it
to.
2 questions.
I would love to. First of all, it was the Obama administration that placed the sanctuary city name on Miami-Dade County, and they were the ones that threatened to cut off federal funding. It was the Obama administration, not the Trump administration. What we did is that we said that we would hold those individuals that ICE was interested that were in Miami-Dade County jails for violating our laws for 48 hours. And so that is exactly what we did. I find it interesting that the Congresswoman says it's the Republicans when, in fact, back in 2010, the Democrats held the Senate, the House, and the presidency, and they didn't pass anything. No comprehensive immigration reform. And so I think this is a bipartisan, this is an issue affecting all Americans, and we should get together and find the solution together, not say Republican, not say Democrat. Together we need to find a solution to this, and that's exactly what I will do, because I actually can work in a bipartisan manner.
Thanks, Carlos. Kim.
Okay. Taking it a little bit more local. What would you think are the top 2 issues facing Monroe County residents and businesses, and what are your solutions for those?
We'll start with Debbie.
Yeah. Well, I think that one of the top concerns currently right now for all Monroe County is this pandemic. Fortunately, I have been very, very proud to see that all of our local elected officials acted early on to control the spread. Everyone was extremely safe, protecting each other, but unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we've lost tens of millions of dollars on tourism industry. No one is coming down here. Restaurants had to shut down, businesses had to close, small bed and breakfasts had to close down. They haven't been able to reopen. So that is the top concern. We need to make sure that we crush this virus. There's a plan to do that. I've been talking about this from the very beginning. And at the same time, provide the economic relief for those people that still have not been able to come back to the workforce. That's why I have fought incessantly in Congress from the very beginning. I brought a meeting of all of our local elected officials in my district, Republicans and Democrats, to hear from them. What do you need? What do we need to do? So we did that. I helped pass $1,200 for every family that received that stimulus check. We included $600 unemployment benefits for families that lost their jobs due to COVID. We provided significant funding to have a public health infrastructure in place so that we can contain the spread. Unfortunately, we lacked leadership in Miami-Dade County, which became one of the hot spots, not just here in Florida, but in the entire country. And so what we need to do is pass a relief bill. We have been negotiating since May. We sent it to the Senate, the HEROES Act, which extended unemployment benefits through January. It would provide another round of stimulus checks. It would continue to support our small businesses, and the Senate didn't do anything. So what we did is we passed an additional bill that would help our airline industry. We are seeing tens of thousands of people being laid off right now from the airline industry. We need to act. We can't keep waiting. The economic recession is extremely severe. So I think that's the top issue, and there are other issues that are linked to the environment, the economy, and affordable housing.
Thank you. Carlos?
Yeah, the economy is always a top issue, and I think that holds true here in Monroe County as the rest of the nation, and then the environment. And with regards to the economy, I'm the one that has the proven track record of how to get an economy going. In Miami-Dade County, when I was the mayor, we started out with a 12.5% unemployment rate in Miami-Dade County. I took steps to diversify the economy of Miami-Dade County. We reduced the taxes to the lowest tax rate, actually the biggest tax cut in its history. So we reduced taxes and then started to invest in those things that would revive the economy. And before the pandemic, we had gotten Miami-Dade County's unemployment rate down to 1.8%, the lowest in its history. And so, you know, that is the number one thing that we have to do. I do not support the Congresswoman's efforts for a $3 trillion bill. $1 trillion, if you laid a dollar end on end, $1 trillion takes you from here to the sun. That's how much money $1 trillion is, and you're going to be saddling our children and our grandchildren with this tremendous amount of debt. In Miami-Dade County, we took the money that we got from the CARES Act and we invested it back in the community. We put it back into the businesses. We put it back into the workers that were actually, you know, hurt very much by this pandemic. And I'm going to take exception to the leadership that I've exhibited in Miami-Dade County. I've actually been praised for the leadership that I showed in Miami-Dade County. It's interesting again that my opponent again criticizes only Republicans. It turns out that in New York, they have had 25,000 deaths in the city of New York. They've had over 30,000 deaths in the state of New York, but they're controlled by Democrats, so that's okay. When it's a Republican, then my opponent is going to be quick to criticize what we've done. In Miami-Dade County, we've had 3,000 deaths. That's very, very unfortunate. In the state of Florida, we've had about 15,000 deaths. Again, that's unfortunate, but that's half of what they've had in New York. And the leadership that we've exhibited here, I think, has been excellent.
Debbie, 30 seconds because you were called out.
Well, first of all, to make the correction, it's a $2 trillion package. Carlos, the last one that we just passed. And again, when the Republicans controlled the House, the Senate, and the White House, they passed a bill that would provide significant, huge tax cuts to the wealthiest Americans and wealthiest and largest corporations, adding to the deficit. And I guarantee you he would have voted for that bill, adding almost $2 trillion just to give a tax cut to the wealthiest Americans. But during a pandemic, apparently, it's irresponsible to provide economic relief to schools. Parents are anxious. They're sending their kids back to school. I'm a mom. I'm sending my kids back to school.
Time, Debbie.
We need to provide the resources to protect our community.
Time, Debbie, and you gave Carlos a shot. You can respond. Please keep it brief so we can move on.
Well, the original proposal was $3 trillion, and then the Democrats have come back to $2 trillion because the Senate I think wants to do a $1 trillion bill. I believe that we do need an economic stimulus, but I don't think that $2 or $3 trillion is the right amount. I think that's way too much.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
This is for each of you. Hi. How would you lower healthcare costs and improve access for one of your constituents who currently relies on Obamacare for coverage?
Carlos, why don't you start?
I'd reduce healthcare costs by competition. I certainly would not reduce healthcare by scrapping the health coverage of 200 million Americans that have private health insurance. I am not in favor of Medicare for all, socialized medicine. I believe that that would be disastrous for this country. Improve competition, lower drug prices by making sure that Americans don't pay the entire cost of research and development. Transparency in pricing, and no phantom bills or no surprise bills to America, and work with the private sector. A public-private solution to our health care is what we need, not another government-run program.
Thank you, Carlos.
When,
Debbie?
from the very beginning, you know, I don't come from politics. I've worked 20 years in this district. Most of my career has been at FIU in the College of Health and as Associate Dean at the College of Medicine. I decided to run to protect healthcare coverage, to provide increased access to healthcare coverage, and I have delivered in the House of Representatives. Right now, we are in the fight of our lives because Trump and the Republicans in Washington, D.C. are taking to court the repeal of the Affordable Care Act, which would strip away healthcare coverage to 300,000 people living with pre-existing conditions right now. My opponent has been very clear that he supports those attacks and he supports repealing the Affordable Care Act, and they have offered absolutely no other plan. In the House of Representatives, I was part of a group that passed a bill, H.R. 3, which would allow Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices, which would significantly lower the price of medicine. It would put a cap also on the cost of Medicare for those people that are participating in Medicare Part D. And we also passed a bill to protect the Affordable Care Act and reduce the cost of premiums. Since 2010, since this law was passed by the House under the Obama administration, it has been under attack. We saw the Texas court ruling against the individual mandate, which in turn increased premiums for the families that needed to participate in the Affordable Care Act. And so in this district, 100,000 families depend on their health care through the ACA. We are right now in the worst health crisis that we have faced in the past 100 years. What we need to be talking about is how are we going to make sure that every American living in Florida's 26th district, but all over the country, has access to good quality health care. And let me just say this, I'm very proud of my record because one of the things that I did, I led a letter that brought back down to Monroe County and parts of my district in Miami-Dade close to $70 million to increase access. And I was the first one to open a testing site during the pandemic in my district with a partnership with CHI.
Carlos, you get 30 seconds but respond to what she accused you of.
First of all, I have never said that I was opposed to Obamacare. I'm saying that it is in the courts, and if it's found to be illegal, then we need to redo the entire thing. Apparently, back in 2010 when they passed Obamacare, they didn't read it, and maybe some portions of it are illegal. I want to improve Obamacare. I am not revolutionary, I am evolutionary. And if Obamacare stays, I want to improve on that, provide access, greater access, but also make sure that whatever comes out of this healthcare debate, if it does turn out to be illegal, if the Supreme Court does find that the individual mandate is illegal, then the whole system falls apart. We then have to create a system. We have to create a system that guarantees pre-existing conditions and guarantees access to all Americans to affordable health care, which was the promise,
Carlos,
which
thank
was
you.
never kept.
Mandy, back to you.
All right, now we're going to talk about mosquitoes. Specifically, I'm going to start my question with the Congresswoman, and then I'd like to hear the mayor's response as well on his opinion. But Congresswoman, that obviously the debate about genetically modified mosquitoes has started up again here in Monroe County after the approval by the EPA and the Mosquito Control Board here locally. The Florida Keys Environmental Coalition had asked your office to send a formal letter of inquiry to the EPA to explain in more detail why they had approved the initiative. The EPA did receive a letter from you, but it was listed under constituents' concerns, and their response, the EPA's response, seems to be sort of public relations talking points from Oxitec's website, the company that sells the genetically modified mosquitoes. Will you be following up for more of a scientific response?
Absolutely, Mandy, absolutely. We've been talking about this here in Monroe for years, right? And there are two groups, two thoughts here. I've spoken to different scientists, actually, because I have my own questions, and there are some scientists that believe it's great, that they should be released, that this is a program that could really help with, dengue and Zika. I personally am not 100% sure of that. And so I am 100 committed to working and making sure that we get responses from the EPA. And this is typical, and I'm saying this because it's a fact, which, by the way, fact check, I've created on my website, debbieforcongress.com/fact check for everything that we're talking about tonight. I think it's important for us to always be honest and transparent. The Trump administration has really appointed people that are following the lobbyists and special interests in some of our most critical agencies, especially here in Monroe County, including the EPA. So, Mandy, you have my word on that.
So you would follow up specifically with a letter of inquiry to the EPA?
100%. We'll do it tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And also, I'd like to hear from the mayor on his opinion on the genetically modified mosquitoes.
Well, we had, I was the mayor when we had Zika in Miami-Dade County, and we were the only government in the world up to that time that beat Zika. And I'm very proud of that record. And we were looking at different ways to kill mosquitoes because that was the vector for Zika. And we looked at GMO, and we also looked at Wolbachia, and we chose to do a trial program with Wolbachia, much less expensive, and it was 75% effective in reducing the population in the city of South Miami. I would be happy to write a letter as your congressman to the EPA to verify the science behind the GMO and to allay any fears or not allay fears, or what is actually happening with GMO. What are the pluses and what are the negatives? I can tell you one of the negatives. It's hyper expensive, much more expensive than Wolbachia. And so if you have a solution that will reduce your mosquito population by 75%, and it's a lot less expensive, and it seems to be a lot less controversial, then why don't you just use Wolbachia and everything would be okay.
Thank you both.
Great, we found some common ground on one of the most controversial issues in the Keys. So, Tim, you can pull your mask down to ask your question.
Well, sorry. As we know, the coral reef is dying at a pretty rapid rate. We're seeing record coral losses because of coral disease pretty much since 2014, But at the same time, the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary is looking at retooling their rules. Are we at a point now where we're going to have to make some hard decisions that might impact the economy, that might impact people's use? This is for both of you. Are we at that point, and what kind of choices and decisions do you support or not support?
Carlos, you start.
Yeah, today I was at the Moat Laboratory and got to actually slice some coral, and they're going to be planting in the near future. And I believe that we need to look at the policies that will protect our coral reefs and in the Keys. I support a policy where there's exclusion zones, but not on a rotational basis, so that you allow the ecosystem to recover, but also allow the economy to continue to thrive. I believe in a win-win scenario. I don't believe in a win-loss scenario. I believe that you can have a strong environmental record, but you also need a strong economy. If you don't have a strong economy, you can't protect the environment very well, because you need the resources that a strong economy brings in order to protect the environment. And so yes, I do believe that some of those policies need to be revisited, but they also need to be revisited with how can you get both, protect the environment and keep a strong economy.
Thank you, Carlos. Debbie.
Thank you. I think it's important to note that a healthy economy depends on a healthy environment. The environment comes before, especially here in Monroe County. We understand that. I worked in Coral Restoration Foundation. It's one of the issues that I am most passionate about. Tim, I led a bipartisan bill with Republican Francis Rooney. We've become very good friends. It's an issue that's also very important to him, to provide funding to protect our coral reefs because of the warming of our ocean, because of the contaminants that we're seeing. We're seeing coral bleaching. We're seeing a virus that's been attacking the reefs for, I think it's almost 2 years now. So I've also worked very closely with NOAA so that they can have the funding. They've put together different groups to do the research to understand what needs to be done. Because if we lose the health of our reefs, there's not going to be a fishing economy, there's not going to be a tourism economy, they're not going to be able to protect. The reefs act as a natural wall when we have these great storms that come through the Florida Keys. So it's a top priority for me. And I think that you do need to have balance. You do need to make sure that if you are revising the book, the guidelines for the National Marine Sanctuary, we've had different forums, and I've attended a couple of them, where we need to listen from our fishermen. You know, we can't change the guidelines and then affect their livelihood as well. So we need to make sure that they're part of the conversation, and I think that that's happening right now. But let me just say, 2-3 weeks ago, we had the largest fish kill along Biscayne Bay in Miami-Dade County because of the failure of the mayor to act according to a report that was presented to him 2 years ago. And when we're talking, the environment is one of my top priorities. That's why I'm sitting on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. That's why I'm vice chair of the Water Subcommittee. I brought down the committee down here to listen to all the stakeholders on the things that we need to do. That's why I led the effort of funding of $200 million for Everglades. But we have to, it's important for people to know Carlos's record on the environment, because I'm very concerned that he has caused this fish kill.
Carlos?
Yeah, just check my
speak on
record.
your-
Check my record on the environment. I was the first mayor in the entire country, first county mayor in the entire country to name a chief resiliency officer. My entire budget is based on resiliency and protecting the environment. I've been named the champion of the urban development boundary in Miami-Dade. What does that mean? I don't allow development to encroach on the Everglades, and I've been named the champion of that. We have the largest public works project in Miami-Dade County history right now, which is the rehabilitation, the reconstruction of our water and sewer infrastructure. We signed a memorandum of understanding with Florida Power and Light to build a reverse osmosis plant over at the Turkey Point in order to give recycled water to Florida Power and Light. They will then be able to draw more water from the Floridian aquifer to desalinate the cooling canals. I have a stellar environmental record, regardless of what my opponent says.
Carlos? Kim?
The Trump administration recently put more sanctions on travel to Cuba from the United States American public. What do you think was the motivation for that, and do you agree with it?
Debbie, why don't you start?
Well, you know, it follows a pattern from this administration. He has really followed an anti-immigration policy. He ended the Cuban reunification program, which was started under President Ronald Reagan, for families to be reunited, because what we've seen under this dictatorship in Cuba is that families have had to flee because of the violence in that country. I have friends that some of their family members were incarcerated. But the last thing that we need is to continue to punish the Cuban people. I mean, we need to, actually, it's interesting because the Cuban reunification bill that I introduced, almost 60% of Cubans support that program in Miami-Dade County. There was a poll showing that. It was introduced in the county commission and it was completely rejected. And I think it's going to just cause more damage and pain to Cubans. I don't know of any country where the Cuban people or others that are under a dictatorial regime can bring democracy to their country when they're starving, when they're being punished by the United States, by the policies of the Trump administration. We need to continue to support them through engagement, through family travel, reuniting, and not deporting Cubans to a place where they can be incarcerated and lose their lives.
Thank you, Debbie. Carlos?
I just find it really interesting that she says that the troubles with the Cuban people is the Trump administration and not the Cuban regime being a Cuban American. The problem with Cuba is the Cuban regime, the socialist, communist regime in Cuba. It's not the Trump administration. And to say otherwise is ridiculous, frankly. And maybe that's why my opponent, when asked to vote on an amendment that condemns socialism as the root cause of the problem in Venezuela, not only did she vote against it, she spoke out against it. She obviously doesn't know what socialism and communism are all about. It's the Cuban regime that's the problem, and we can't afford to continue to prop up that Cuban regime. The same way we need to see what we can do about Venezuela to bring them back to a democracy. In the same way that we have to focus in on Nicaragua and bring back a democracy to both Venezuela and to Nicaragua and eventually to Cuba, my homeland, where I left 60 years ago, not on my own free will, but because I was being indoctrinated under a communist socialist system. And I found a land of opportunity here, and that's why I'm running for Congress, because I love this country. I don't want to change fundamentally this country. I want to improve it, and that's why I'm running for Congress.
Thank you, Carlos. And Debbie, you get to respond to what he talked about.
Yeah. I think that Carlos doesn't understand how things work in Washington, D.C. and Congress with these bills. What I voted against was an MTR, which is a trick that the minority party uses right before you're introducing a bill to kill the bill. That's why I voted against it. And the bill was actually to provide TPS, temporary protected status, to Venezuelans. We passed that bill through my committee, the Judiciary Committee. I am the only South American member of Congress. Believe me when I tell you, I know what it looks like when people are trying to grab onto power and become a dictator or an authoritarian regime. I have said this many, many times, whether it's coming from the left or the extreme right. So the Senate Republicans have completely rejected TPS for Venezuelans, which is the bill that we passed in the House of Representatives. I did join my colleague, Republican Mario Diaz-Balart, on a resolution denouncing socialism, Carlos. But when we talk about communism, let's not go too far. There has been an ethics investigation because Carlos Gimenez went to China.
This was just 30 seconds too.
Huh?
You were just responding to that. You're
Oh,
getting into a
okay.
whole other thing.
All right. You
Sorry.
keep me real with the
And
timing.
I'm
I'm
trying
fine.
to, well, it's a big job. Gwen would normally be our last question. That's why we usually do this at the end. So I'm going to let Gwen ask a normal question. If you guys have some, dare I
Whatever
say,
that
quick,
is.
I have a
quick
quick-
questions.
I have a quick one.
Well, I'm going to let Gwen go, but
Okay.
then, because we've got to be fair to the other candidates, because then I still want you guys to be able to have a closing statement, which I'm guessing might not be really clean. We may have to go back and forth a little. So, Gwen, do your question, and you guys
I'm
think
clean.
of some
I'm clean.
Got it.
Let's do it.
quick questions, which will need some quick answers, so we can do more for the audience.
Okay.
So,
For the
Gwen,
representative.
This is normal.
For the representative, you and groups backing you have referred to the mayor as corrupt and attacked his sons for working as lobbyists. Why is this relevant to the campaign?
I think that, look, this is interesting. About 67% of Americans, when they were asked if they believed that corruption affected their everyday life, they said yes. And after being in Washington, D.C. and dealing with some politicians, I can tell you that it's 100%, that Americans are affected by corruption 100% of the time. And what we've seen is a pattern of ethics investigations, complaints, not just a couple of years ago, 3 years ago. This has been a pattern. They have investigated the mayor's sons for getting contracts from the county government without being registered lobbyists. The mayor has actually used the pulpit of his office to benefit himself and his family. It's a family affair. And he actually just recently used taxpayer dollars to promote himself in Monroe County during the pandemic. He actually had to take that down because he was caught. So this is a pattern of behavior, and I take my responsibility to represent all of you very seriously. I come from Ecuador. I've been working in this country since I was 15 years old. I'm doing it for the families that need it the most. The last thing we need in government is someone that has been investigated for corruption multiple times to represent the families in Florida's 26th district.
Thank you, Debbie. Carlos, I assume you would like to respond to that.
Oh, yeah.
2 minutes.
I'm going to respond to that one, okay? Let's go to her commercial. She says that my son worked for the company that was responsible for the bridge collapse at FIU. My son did work for that company 6 years before, not during the time. She said that my son also worked as a lobbyist for red light cameras. That's true, he did. But what she doesn't tell you is that when that same item of red light cameras came before the county, it was my administration that recommended against installing red light cameras in Miami-Dade County, and to this day, not one red light camera has been installed in Miami-Dade County. I haven't been found guilty of anything. People file ethics complaints all the time about this and that and the other. Every single time, my name has been cleared. I've been a public servant for over 45 years in my county. The problem with Ms. Powell is that she has ethical issues. Her family has ethical issues. Her husband works for a Ukrainian oligarch who is now under investigation for money laundering. And her husband was the attorney for a number of the companies that have been recently raided by the FBI and being under investigation for laundering hundreds of millions of dollars. And so this is an attack by her to try to impugn my integrity, when in fact, she better look, in her own household. And so, again, my record speaks for itself. I've been elected in Miami-Dade County 5 times, 3 times as its mayor, 3 times, in a mostly Democrat county, Why? Because I can work across the aisle. Why? Because I don't make promises that I don't keep. And yes, I have a very stellar record of being completely ethical and doing everything by the book.
Carlos, Debbie, 30 seconds to
yeah,
respond to what he said.
Look, I feel like Carlos is a little desperate in this race. He knows he's not winning. The fact is, I'm glad that he brought this up, because this is the same attack that was debunked in 2018. It's completely false. My husband worked for an American company as an attorney, never had anything to do with the man that they're alleging him to have any relationship with, completely was debunked. And I think it's to distract, right? And because he's so upset that the truth is coming out about the deals that he's been doing behind the scenes, his trip to China, the deals that he's given his sons. But fact check. Listen, don't listen to me. Go to debbieforcongress.com/fact check. I think that's important.
Thank you, Debbie. Can you, 15, real quick response, Carlos?
Right. Go ahead, do the fact check, and you'll see that the FBI raided the Cleveland offices and the Miami offices of a number
Yeah,
of companies that her husband
but-
was the counsel of, looking
That's
for
false.
and investigating money laundering to
Fact
hundreds
check,
of millions of
yes.
dollars.
Fact check.
Thank you.
It's
So-
crazy. Yeah.
On this one, we're going to say, everybody fact check that.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah.
Please do.
Any quick questions, because we're running long on this, but it's very good.
Okay, yeah.
Mandy,
Quick
it better be a quick question.
quick
You
question
guys
for the
need
mayor, I promise.
Quick answers.
A quick answer.
As a Trump supporter, do you think that one-party domination is better for our country than a two-party compromise government that most of us grew up with?
The Trump supporter, which one of them are you?
The
I
mayor.
think she's, okay, all right. For me?
Yes.
I believe in a balance of power. And I think that too much power in the hands of anybody is not good. America is built on a balance of power. Actually, the Constitution protects the minority from what they consider to be the tyranny of the majority. And so I believe in that. I believe that we need to protect those that need to be protected, the minority. And I do believe that the best form of government is a good, balanced government. In Miami-Dade, we have a balanced government. Half of our commissioners are Democrats, half of them are Republicans, and I've been able to work with them very, very well over the last almost 10 years to get a lot of things done, a lot of good things done for our community. And what's a testament to that? We've had hundreds of thousands of new residents come to Miami-Dade because that's the place they want to be. It's the greatest place, to me, in the place that I want to live. And I'm very honored to have been the mayor, to work with that great commission with all kinds of differences of opinion, but at the end, always looking to see how we can move it forward.
Thank you.
Because it's a good question, it'll be our last question, but Debbie, assuming you're not a Trump supporter,
Yeah.
to her point
So
of,
do you think that one-party domination is better for our
No,
country than a
I mean,
two-party
that's the road
compromise?
to an authoritarian regime, right? That's one of the reasons why I've been so vocal in the Judiciary Committee to have accountability of this government. And I worry that the appointments by Donald Trump, the appointment of William Barr, is going to be extremely dangerous for us and our democracy. This is going to be one of the most critical elections. This will determine whether our institutions are going to withstand the attacks that this president has had on our governments. He's trying to instill doubt on the election system. And it's the first time in the history of our nation that we're facing that threat. But, I need to respond because I don't want anyone to fall for talking points and things that I'm hearing from the mayor. He failed to bring together his city mayors to talk about the funding that came down from CARES. All 34 Republicans and Democrats denounced him because he acted as a strong mayor without communicating, controlling all the funds. So when you say balance of power, I would
Time.
ask the city mayors what they think about that.
time, Debbie, and you went,
Yeah.
well, that wasn't exactly on subject,
I'm
but Carlos,
sorry.
you get
I'm
to
sorry.
respond to the accusation she made, and then be prepared to do your closing statements and if you, same rules apply.
How many minutes, Todd? How many?
A minute and a half.
All right, all right.
So
all right.
I'm going to let you get your thoughts out, but
Yeah.
let's
The
talk
CARES-
about
the
yourself.
CARES Act
Right
money-
now, Carlos is
No problem.
responding to her accusation.
Right. The CARES Act money is something that is governed by the county commission, not the 34 mayors of Miami-Dade County. I had dozens of meetings with the 34 mayors of Miami-Dade County. We agreed on some things, we disagreed on some other things. And again, that's democracy. And so I felt, and the county commission felt that that money should have been spent a certain way, and that's the way that the money was spent in that manner, because we were responsible for it. And we wanted that money to go to the people and to the businesses of Miami-Dade County, not so much to the governments of Miami-Dade County. And that's what I fought for, and I'm very happy that I did.
Now, State Senate, you guys are going to be up next, but closing statements, Carlos, why don't you start? Again, if you speak on your own, then we go on. Otherwise, we're going to go back and forth. It's up to you guys. But Carlos, minute and a half-ish.
Thank you again for hosting this event. My name is Carlos Gimenez. I am the mayor, currently the mayor of Miami-Dade County, and I am running to be your representative in Congress. A little bit about myself. I am a firefighter. 45 years ago, I joined the Miami Fire Department. I became one of its first paramedics. I also became one of the first SWAT medics in the United States. Rose quickly through the ranks and became the fire chief, the youngest fire chief and the first Hispanic fire chief in the city of Miami. Led it through its largest reorganization in its history. About 9 years later, I was asked to become the city of Miami manager when the city of Miami was going through bankruptcy, and it was an oversight board. I instituted the largest tax cut in 50 years in the city of Miami, and when I left and retired 3 years later, left it with over close to $150 million in reserves, the largest in its history. Ran for county commission, then ran for mayor. I've been the mayor of Miami-Dade County for 9.5 years. Instituted the largest tax cut in Miami-Dade County history. Saved the taxpayers of Miami-Dade about $2 billion. Also about almost $2,000 per household. Unemployment rate, as I stated, was 12.5% when I took over as the mayor. It got down about 1.8%, the lowest in its history before the pandemic. I have a stellar environmental record. I've protected the urban development boundary. I've also gone into underserved communities, and the way that we were able to bring the unemployment rate down was training people that had never had a job, going into those communities and giving them the opportunity to have a job. And that's how we got that unemployment rate down to 1.8%. Diversified the economy. We became a tech center. Miami is number one. Miami is number one right now in new businesses being created, startups. It's Miami. And again, I want to take that kind of experience to Washington, that can-do attitude to Washington, that working across the aisle to Washington. And on November 3rd, I hope that you punch, or you don't have a number here, I hope you vote for Carlos Gimenez for Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. Debbie, closing statements.
You know, I didn't come from politics before I decided to run in 2018. Like I said, I spent 20 years of my career working in this district, Coral Restoration Foundation, Zoological Society of Florida, the FIU College of Health, and then I became the Associate Dean at the medical school. And I know this community. I have met with the families that are trying to get their health care. I have been fighting for gun safety reforms because in South Dade, one of the top issues affecting South Dade in this district is the increased violence among kids under the age of 18. And the environment has been something that has been with me from the very beginning. My father instilled in me the love and respect for our environment. And I'm very proud that I have been able to deliver in every single promise that I made when I ran in 2018. I want to continue to do that. You know, I've been very fortunate. I'm very grateful, very, very grateful that you placed the trust in me. I have been able to work with Republican colleagues. I have many Republican colleagues that are my friends. We passed 10 bills that were signed by President Donald Trump. These are things that don't get reported, but I have been a part of a coalition that works across the aisle. I want to continue to do that. We have to do that. We have no other choice. We are one. You know, people have become so divided in this country, and the name calling, people are tired of that. And we need to bring all of us back together. We need to make sure that we find the solutions for the families that are watching at home right now, right? They don't care about these attacks. What they care about is, what are you going to do for me? And I promise you that when I'm in Congress, I bring your voice with me, and that I'm going to do everything possible to make sure that I provide the economic relief so that we can start building back our economy.
Okay, thank you both so very much for being here tonight. Have a good trip back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So State Senate is,
Thank you both.
State Senate candidates, come on up. Have your signs.
I know.
I know, I was going to say something.
While we're changing candidates, and again, thank you both of you. That was great. We will do our regular shout outs. You're seeing us tonight because of Two Oceans Digital and our great camera team up there. And also, we're simulcasting on the county's television channels. And thank you, Jathan. I know you're in the booth at the county, making sure everything is good. My phone has been eerily quiet tonight, so I'm hoping that that's a really good sign. But if it's not, please let me know. Okay, we got these guys up here as soon as Javier gets down. All right. Javier, why don't you go? You can take your mask off to speak. Introduce yourself just very briefly, and we'll get right to questions.
Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to be with you. Javier Fernandez. Until last Friday, I had the honor of representing the 114th District in the Florida House, and now looking to earn your support so I can serve as your Florida Senator here in the 39th District. Thank you.
Good evening.
Maria?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ana Maria Rodriguez. I am a member of the Florida House of Representatives in District 105, and I look forward to being your next state senator for Senate District 39. Thank you.
Tim, you start us off.
And I know, obviously, neither of you are from here, but one of the big issues I think...
Take your mask down,
Oh,
Tim,
sorry.
please.
One of the big issues I feel... I have a special needs son who's on the autism spectrum. And I see it's one of the great needs here in our community is for more social services for children, psychological programs for children, therapies for children. There seems to be a good amount for adults, but not for children. If elected, what would you do to bring more of those types of services to the children of Monroe County? And also, what would you do to possibly bring a Baker Act facility here? Because currently, we don't even have a Baker Act facility in our own county for children who have been Baker Acted who are under the age of 18.
Anne Marie, why don't you start?
Okay, thank you. I actually have 2 children that have IEPs and attend Dade County Public Schools. And as a parent, obviously, it concerns me that when looking for education options for my children, I wasn't actually able to find those services that you're describing in the charter school or private school setting. In fact, when I applied for the charter school for my children, they said, no, we definitely do not do that. If you want services, you need to get them in the public school setting. Having said that, I'm very pleased with the public schools in my area where I live. And I'm also an advocate for school choice. I think they're not things that you can support, either or. I think you can be a supporter of public schools, but also support the ability for parents to choose what is the best option for their families and for their children. And so, to answer your question, Tim, I would support having charter schools and private schools offering services for children that are on the spectrum, and level the playing field so that they too give the same things that the public schools must give because they're public schools.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Javier.
Thanks, Todd, and thank you for the question. My wife is a clinical child psychologist. She works with kids on the spectrum. She diagnoses kids on the spectrum. I am acutely aware, based on her lived experience, at just how scarce these resources are. And for that reason, that notwithstanding the fact that my opponent has criticized me for sending my children to a parochial school, which I pay for with my own money, a choice I choose to make, I fight very hard every single day in the chamber for our public schools, because one of the things we need to deliver these services is scale. I think if you talk to board members here in Monroe County, one of the challenges they have is getting to scale so we can offer these services at a level where families can access resources. That's why the representative was able to go to a public school district like Miami-Dade County and have those services available, because the scale, unfortunately, is not available in our private and charter school settings. The odd part of her argument is that by removing scarce public dollars, because as we all know, for the last 20 years, this Republican legislature has not funded public schools to meet the impacts of inflation. We are actually 20% below where we were in 2009. We started the last crisis. We are robbing the most vulnerable children of the ability to access those resources because we are taking away from that scale. And so I've been an unabashed advocate for our public schools, notwithstanding the fact that it does not benefit me one iota, because again, I make the economic choice to send my children to a parochial school, because I know that there are vulnerable families across Miami-Dade County and Monroe County that need those services, and taking scarce dollars away from our public school system hurts them more than anyone else.
Henry, you get to respond to what he talked about.
Thank you so much, Todd. So yes, in response to what my opponent said, this year, Florida actually made it into the top 5 for teacher salaries, starting salaries. That's something that Governor DeSantis and our legislature led, and I'm very proud to have supported that. So our starting teachers in the state of Florida are now starting close to $50,000 a year. And again, that's something that is unprecedented, and it's contrary to what my opponent is saying. And in regards to what he said about a comment about his children and the fact that he chooses to send his children to private schools, of course I support not just people that can afford to pay for it like he does, but parents who cannot afford to pay for it, which is why it's so important to support school choice, because people who do not have the resources to put their children in schools like the one where he sends his school allows parents to do that.
Javier, you get a quick response.
Thanks. No, the criticism is a funny one because she attended the very same schools that she criticizes me for having attended, number one. Number two, the choice is not about how I choose to spend my money. What we're fighting for is to make sure that the most vulnerable have access to the resources they need to be successful in an educational environment. That is, as she's admitted, best accomplished in our public schools. And lastly, I oppose school choice, not because of choice, because currently I'm exercising it. What I oppose is a system that takes scarce public dollars from our public schools and diverts it to private, in some cases for-profit schools, with zero accountability, with no concern for accountability, which was exactly the comments of her colleague on the House floor when we asked her, would you support accountability measures? The question is, we're not willing to consider them at this time.
Thanks, guys. We're going to move on. Kim?
The Turkey Point nuclear power plant is old and has issues with the water cooling towers. And our own Florida Keys Aqueduct Authority has fought FPL's efforts recently to continue on with things as is. What will you do to fix this problem for us, since it could negatively affect our drinking water?
Well, you start, Javier.
Thanks, Todd. I think what we need is focused leadership on the issue. You know, I think Miami-Dade County does some very positive steps to help alleviate the problem by implementing a reclaimed water use package here, taking 15 million gallons of reclaimed water and allowing, again, FPL to take the surplus water that generates to desalinate the canals. I think that's a positive step forward. But I think all options have to be on the table. That could be requiring that FPL install cooling towers if we think that it actually would help alleviate the problem and preserve our potable water on a going forward basis. I have been in conversations with FPL on this issue. I will stay in conversation with them, holding them accountable, making sure that Durham and DEP are making sure that they hit their benchmarks that they committed to. It's absolutely important that we stay on top of these issues, and I commit to being the kind of leader who will be engaged every single day to preserve our water quality. And I think I can say all those things, but what speaks the loudest is the people who've endorsed me in the race, and they are understanding of my commitment to these issues. That's why I am the only candidate in this race who's been endorsed by every major environmental group, including the Florida Conservation Voters, Everglades Trust, Vote Water, among many others.
And Maria.
Thank you, Todd. I would absolutely continue. I, too, have been in communication with FPL and with the community members regarding this issue. I would 100% support the construction of cooling towers. My concern with regards to the cooling tower construction is the cost involved and the fact that the end user, us that all have our FPL bills, the cost is going to trickle down to each and every one of us. So do I support it? Absolutely. My concern is that all of our utility bills will go up, and that is something that I know affects all of us and our bottom line.
Clint.
Hi, how are you? Governor DeSantis recently lifted all restrictions on restaurants and opened up phase 3 of the reopening plan. Local cities can't fine people anymore for not wearing a mask. Did he do the right thing? Are we safe?
Anna Maria.
I think that Governor DeSantis is guided by science and evidence that would lead him to that recommendation and to that decision. I don't think he makes decisions in a vacuum. And so the fact that he made that recommendation to enter into phase 3 is one that's, again, guided by science. And we can't continue to cripple our small business owners. People who own bars and restaurants are hurting, particularly here in the Florida Keys. And we can't continue, making these unrealistic, restrictions and then, having them shut down. In Miami alone, we've had, I don't know, I've lost count of how many businesses are never going to reopen due to this pandemic. I think there are ways to implement safety, such as, requiring your patrons to wear masks until they sit down, social distancing where the tables are separated in a manner that's safe for everyone that's there, not just the workers, but also the people, the patrons that are consuming at the restaurants and at the bars. And so I think there has to be a healthy balance. I don't think keeping businesses closed is the way to go, because many people, due to COVID, have committed suicide. You've seen the mental illness numbers increase through the roof, and a lot of people are hurting, not from the actual virus, but from the cure of the virus. And so I think that Governor DeSantis did the right thing.
Javier.
Todd, thanks. I think the governor acted without any foundation in science, frankly. I think he had been measured in terms of allowing local mayors, local elected leaders, to let the data in their community kind of guide the decision making. I've always been a proponent of local control. In this case, I thought more local control was a better thing. The uniform policy that came down last week came down without, to my understanding, because I spoke to 2 mayors that very same day in this county, any consultation with local leadership. And so it caught everyone by surprise with the inability to kind of put together the enforcement regime or adjust their enforcement regime to kind of transition to this new normal, quote unquote. But what I find most troubling is, I think, a general attitude of the Republican leadership in this state and the governor himself in addressing problems head on. It started with the unemployment crisis. He didn't even acknowledge there was a problem with the system for 15 days. And it continues today with this reopening. I agree we need to reopen. My friends are in the restaurant business. I grew up with them. They had to fire 300 people about 2.5 months ago because they just could not continue to sustain the operation. I take no joy in their difficulties. But what we need is to talk about solutions that allow us to reopen and protect workers as well. One of the things I've been advocating for is a system that we've adopted at Congress here, which but only applies to the medium-sized companies. We've got 7 million workers in Florida that do not have any sort of paid leave. These are the people on our front lines. They need to go back into that we require to go back into the economy because they need to earn the paycheck. We need an unemployment system that is fundamentally transformed and becomes basically a pandemic assistance program, so that employee, if they've been exposed or if they're sick, can raise their hands and step out of the economy instead of having an incentive to not report and continue to put us all at risk and put the recovery on a longer glide path.
Thanks, Javier. Mandy.
For Representative Rodriguez, sorry, I keep forgetting to look at the camera. In one of your campaign commercials, you say, quote, "to help our neighbors, guided by our faith, not dictated by government." Does that mean that you believe women's reproductive rights should also not be dictated by government?
That's a great question.
I think she.
That was for
sorry.
Representative Rodriguez, yeah.
Yes, thank you. I am a born, raised, and I'm still a practicing Catholic. I do not support abortion. I think that if there's a case of incest or rape, that is an exception that should be made. I especially do not believe in late-term abortion. I think the sanctity of life must be preserved, and I believe that life begins at conception.
Thank you.
Yes.
Tim.
Kind of a follow-up to the pandemic question, and this goes to the unemployment again. Do you think we should have continued to partner with the federal government to get the extra $600 a month instead of the governor's decision not to continue that? And then also, going forward, did the pandemic show us that maybe we need to bump up what the weekly unemployment amount is?
Javier, when you start.
And that's for both of them, and whoever wants to start.
Sure, I'm happy to start. Look, I think without a doubt, why would we ever turn away? I mean, what's the saying in Spanish? Lo barato cuesta caro, which means when you're cheap, it costs you a lot of money. That's exactly the problem we have with Florida's unemployment system, right? We have a system that denies people benefits and denied the ability for us to bring in another $600 million of stimulus into our local economy because of that decision of the governor. And the reason that happened, which has not been admitted in my estimation, is because the system is not just broken, it's busted. Right? We don't have the resources. We are slow playing claims, in my estimation, because we've spent down $3.3 billion of the $4 billion we have in that trust fund. Folks, we probably don't have the money to pay claims going forward. We just haven't come clean with the public to reckon with that reality. It's going to be a very hard fall for a lot of Floridians. We know that furloughs are becoming permanent layoffs, number one, and we have no plan. And this Republican state-led legislature and governor have zero plan or zero interest in discussing a plan. I've been calling for special session not because I want to go up there and belabor the point with my members, but we need a plan to protect vulnerable workers and make sure that people can actually survive what is a very difficult economic circumstance we're all asking to live through.
Thank you. Anna Maria, same question.
Yes, I think what Mayor Gimenez actually said earlier regarding the federal money and the fact that this money, it's not a blank check that, you can just keep writing blank checks over and over again. I think that, the governor did the responsible thing. I think that obviously we need to look at our unemployment system moving forward. I don't think anyone ever expected it for this pandemic to hit us obviously the way it did and to the extent that it did. As a future senator, I am willing to look at increasing unemployment benefits if this were to happen again, obviously, and I think that it's something that all the legislators need to take into consideration moving forward. I think that the current payments are too low. The weekly payments are based on an economy that's 30 years old, and I would absolutely support overhauling our unemployment system.
Thank you. Kim.
How will you help us with the Keys coastal flooding problem?
Let me start with Anna Maria, then Javier.
So I think it's important to look at what other cities are doing and looking at their best practices. I've actually, as a Miami resident, I look towards Miami Beach as an example of what's being done properly and what's being done right. The city of Miami Beach invested $450 million in pump stations throughout the city, as well as elevating their roads. I think that we need to see, again, what our neighboring cities are doing. I would support not just using the monies, the local funds, but using state dollars and federal dollars to help make all this a reality. But action does need to be taken, not just during the flooding, the sea level rise, but obviously during king tides, which happen on a regular basis.
Javier.
Thank you, Todd. Very quickly, to go back to the last question to make a point. What we were talking about was not a blank check with that last stimulus offer. That was existing money that was budgeted, taken from FEMA's trust fund balance to provide additional stimulus by the president. That's why he was able to do it via executive action. So just to clarify that point. So we robbed ourselves of $600 billion to help our small businesses weather this pandemic. On the issue of coastal flooding, I think we all can say very pretty things. We all can make all sorts of promises. But you have to look to our records. And I would invite you not to take what I say as gospel in verse, but look to the organizations that are supporting us in our races. As I mentioned before, I'm the only candidate endorsed by the Everglades Trust, Florida Conservation Voters, the Sierra Club, and Vote Water. And that's because they understand I am committed to having a state government that is actually a funding partner in addressing these challenges. We can no longer, as a state government, pretend that we have no responsibility to address these issues. We need to think about doing what our municipal partners are doing, which is looking at bringing forward revenues and leveraging those revenues with local and federal dollars to address these challenges. And I'm committed to doing that when I'm your senator.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I'd like to hear where each of you stand on state preemption. For example, in Key West, the City Commission wanted to ban certain sunscreens that had certain chemicals, but obviously the state was like, no, you can't, in plastic bags, and now there's like tree stuff.
Like home rule type.
Oh, yeah, home rule. Where do you stand on that? Where do you draw the line?
Javier, you want to start?
Well, thank you for the question. I appreciate it. First, it's been an interesting campaign, and I often chuckle when I see my opponent's campaign slogan, which is "He's one of us." Well, I don't think that's a question we should be asking ourselves, whether either one are one of us, but really it's how do you defend us? How do you protect us? How do you vote to support us? And when it comes to home rule, I am the only candidate in this race that has a near perfect, if not a perfect record on supporting local control. And on the sunscreen ban, my opponent had a chance to possibly kill the bill in committee, and she voted for the measure. On the floor, she changed her vote. I guess politics probably had nothing to do with that, but I am deeply committed. I've been acknowledged by the Florida League of Cities as a hometown champion, home rule champion. I will continue to be a home rule champion on this issue and the issue of vacation rentals, which is another local control issue where we certainly have a difference of opinion.
And Maria, you can respond, of course, and 2 minutes on the question.
Yes. So regarding the question, as a former councilwoman for 8 years, I served my community from 2010 through 2018. I can tell you, obviously, I am a supporter of home rule because I was directly affected by it as a council member. Regarding what my opponent said about the sunscreen bill, I did vote yes in committee because I was a member of the committee, and I didn't want to kill the bill because I think it's important to study and learn more, and that's what I did. I educated myself so that when I had the opportunity to vote again on the floor, I voted no, which is in agreement with what the city of Key West wanted. And so I made that decision with the information that I had at the moment in the committee and then again on the floor.
Mandy?
For both of you, it doesn't matter who goes first. What State Department has the most influence in the Florida Keys, and who do you know in that department?
Keep going back and forth. Anna Maria first.
I think Durham would have a tremendous, and I personally don't have a relationship at the moment with anyone.
Expand on that a little. Who is, what department is that, and who is he?
Durham is the Department of Environmental Issues that addresses things for the environment. Again, I know a lot of people. I can just pick up a phone and ask for assistance to anyone in any of the departments as a state legislator, but I do not have a person at the moment that I have a relationship with in that department.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Javier?
I think there are a number of departments that have a lot of impact. Certainly the Department of Environmental Protection is one. I think that there are also other quasi-government agencies like the South Water Management District that have huge impacts as well. We have relationships with board members, both Republican and Democrat, Charlie Martinez, Cheryl Mead, for example, on that board that we can work with to address water quality issues across the Keys. Certainly, I'd like to name the name of the Legislative Affairs Director for DEP, but I think he's since left, so I won't embarrass myself and say the wrong name by trying to address your question. But I think the bottom line is there are a myriad of departments. Another department we haven't mentioned on a critical issue, I think, of economic development and social equity concern here is affordable housing. And at the Florida Housing Finance Corporation, deep relationships with Trey Price and the leadership there, because I've been working on a bill to provide more local authority to meet that challenge. Because I frankly, as an advocate for 20 plus years on this issue, was pleasantly surprised for the first time in my life as I met with chambers across the Keys to hear that this was an issue not just for folks who are concerned about people having a place, but needing to address this issue so we could actually address what is a business employee retention issue across the Florida Keys. So lots of departments that have impact on very critical issues for this county, and I look forward to working with all of them to address your concerns.
Thank you. Can I ask a follow-up?
It's quick.
Do either of you do either of you have any contacts with DEO, which obviously governs development here in the Keys?
Yes, I do have a relationship with the DEO. As a matter of fact, as a state representative, I've been helping many of my constituents with issues relating to unemployment. And so I had a relationship with the legislative affairs person who's no longer there, but now with the secretary, the Lawson who was there, Satter who was also helping. So yes, I do have very good relationships at the DEO.
Thank you.
President Javier.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We've been working with Secretary Satter and his chief of staff here for the last 5 months, processing thousands of unemployment claims in combination with other members across the district. So we've been working with them, but we need to get beyond the unemployment to some of the other issues that DEO is responsible for, and I look forward to doing that as well.
Thank you.
We've got a little bit of time, like a couple of quick questions.
I got a quick one. Come on.
Okay, go ahead. That's
All right.
fine, Tim. I'm getting some leeway here.
Then what do you think the biggest issue facing the Florida Keys is at this point, and what would you do to help resolve that issue?
Your easy question is what is the biggest issue
Right,
facing
right.
the Florida Keys?
Just because you say it
Quick
fast
answer.
doesn't mean it's a
Okay.
quick question.
It was my quickest question. How about that? It was my quickest question to ask.
Sure, so I'm going to break it into the short term and the long term. In the short term, I think we need a response to COVID. We need more support for our small businesses. It's been an embarrassment what this Republican-led legislature and our governor have done in terms of providing small business relief. $50 million in loans. We gave back $550 million in corporate refunds to our largest corporations here in Florida. We need to do more for them. And as I mentioned, we need to actually modernize our unemployment system so that we actually have a pandemic relief program so people can step in and out of this economy without fear of going hungry or keeping a roof over their head. In the long term, I think the issue that we all need to struggle with is water quality and sea level rise mitigation, and I'm committed to finding new sources of revenue to address those issues, partnering with local communities and our federal government to get it done.
Thank you, Aaron. Thanks for being brief. Anna Maria,
Yes.
biggest issues.
I think one of the biggest issues is economic recovery, not just from COVID, but I know some businesses are still reeling from Irma. So we need to try to help our businesses continue to get back on their feet and to thrive. The other issue, I think, is affordable housing and not just rentals, not creating rental situations, but helping people get into home ownership. I think that's really what breaks the cycle, is when people can actually get in and purchase a property, which is why I sponsored an appropriation last session, which passed, for $1 million for the Windley Key Habitat for Humanity project. Because I supported it because Habitat supports having people purchase their homes and home ownership.
Thanks. Before I let them ask about world peace or something,
Look how quick that was.
we're going to do closing statements because we're right at 6:45 now. Anna Maria, why don't you start, and Javier close? And the same rules apply. Be nice.
Again, my name is Ana Maria Rodriguez. I am, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a state representative for 2 years. Prior to that, I served as a councilwoman in the city of Doral for 8 years. I'm a wife, I'm a mom of 2 boys, and I love my community. I see Monroe County as a very special and very cherished area that needs to be preserved and needs to be taken care of by someone who not only understands this community, but is willing to fight and to bring home the resources that our community deserves. I have a track record of doing that already. Over the last 2 years, I've brought home millions and millions of dollars to every aspect, every bill that every appropriation, not every the one that I filed, but up to the vast majority of them, because it shows my tenacity and the fact that I am willing to go the extra mile for my community. If you vote for me, you won't go wrong. I promise you that Monroe County will do very, very well in the legislature, and I'm honored to have the support of our state representative, Holly Rashine, as well as Senator Annie Terry Flores, among others, as well as our sheriff, Rick Ramsey, which tells you that I am the law and order candidate. I want to make sure that our communities remain safe and fruitful for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna Maria. Javier.
Thanks, Todd, and thanks for organizing this forum and to all the panelists for your questions. My name is Javier Fernandez. I'm a proud son of Cuban exiles, excuse me. My mom will get very upset with me when she's watching me for not saying that. Cuban exiles who came to this country in search of freedom and opportunity. I'm running because I'm concerned about the future of our state and the potential prosperity my children may or may not inherit. The environmental legacy we are going to leave them or not leave them based on what happens over this next decade. I stepped out of private practice to step into public life, begrudgingly in some cases, but it's been an incredible journey because I've met incredible people across Monroe County and Dade County that have enriched my life in more ways than I could have imagined. I look forward to serving as your senator because I want to continue to create opportunities for others as I have in my private practice. I want to make sure that our public education system is the first ladder of opportunity. Once people get out in the working economy, I want to make sure that people have a chance to participate fully in our economy. And that starts by investing in the smallest of businesses, which is something I've been committed to my entire life in private practice and in private public service. We are at a critical crossroads, and I think we need independent and thoughtful leadership. I mean to offer that to all of you. I hope that on or before November 3rd, I earn your support. And while my opponent claims she's a law and order candidate, I'm happy to say that I'm also endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police and hope to earn your support, more importantly, before November 3rd. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Javier. I'm not really sure that was a dig.
It's
So,
fine.
thank you both.
Thank you.
State Senate candidates.
Thank you, Bruce.
The state rep candidates would come on up.
Thank you.
While they are switching, I want to thank, and Kelly's up here adjusting the mics, and Kelly's been with us, I think, as we've always said, 15 years or so, audio, video in paradise. When she's not doing this, she does high-end stereos for your high-end home. And also, she's up there constantly working every microphone up here, at every moment. If
No swearing.
even Tim's, even though I've wanted to block Tim a couple times. So, coming up, guys.
Thank you so much. Have a good night. Drive safely, guys.
Thanks, guys.
you.
Thank you. Have a good trip back. You guys did great.
Thank you, Mayor.
So,
Thanks, Mayor.
have a little changing around here. All right, everyone. We have our state representative candidates for District 120 up. We're going to get right to it so we can keep moving along. We're almost on time. Thanks for everybody's patience. Congresswoman, you're in front of the camera. No. Thanks. Okay, Jim, why don't you introduce yourself?
Jim Mooney, fifth generation Floridian, lifelong resident of the Florida Keys, running for House District 120.
Thanks, Jim. Clinton.
Thank you. Clint and Barras. Wife and I moved to Key West in 1998 and also running for your state representative.
Thanks, guys. Get ready to. Kim, first
Okay.
question.
There's been recent talk about establishing a toll on the overseas highway. What are your thoughts on that issue?
Let's start with Clint. Toll.
Yeah, I fully support a toll. In 2018, we had over 5.1 million visitors come to the Florida Keys, and we have a lot of issues that are going to require additional revenue to address. Everything we've talked about, our coral decline, but we've also got affordable housing issues, infrastructure issues. So I absolutely am in favor of that. I do not think that any tourists that are going to drive down to the Florida Keys are not going to come because they have to pay a toll on the way.
Thanks, Clint. Jim, toll.
It's funny, we've been talking about that since I was a teenager. So yeah, I support the toll. I think the biggest issue to the toll is going to be to make and understand, FDOT understand that these monies can't just go to more asphalt and more signs. So this money is going to have to be allocated in such a way that it actually works to what it's meant to do, which is to help us with our nearshore water quality. And look, FDOT's one of the biggest contributors to stormwater runoff in Monroe County. Look at the linear miles in this county. There's basically it's 240 miles of linear shoreline here for all practical purposes. So we need that money to not be allocated more towards asphalt. We need that money to be allocated towards infrastructure that does help with workforce housing, that does help with our nearshore water qualities, which does help with the cleanup and pickup of the debris left behind. So the biggest hurdle is probably not going to be the toll in and of itself. The biggest hurdle is probably going to be convincing FDOT to reallocate those monies in such a way that makes an impact that's a positive impact for Monroe County.
Thanks, Jim. Quick programming change or tweak. We're going to try to cut it to 1 minute 30 seconds, which seems to work pretty well. It gets more questions through, and I will not cut you off. You'll get your thought out. So,
Sure. Thank you.
Gwen.
I'm going to ask the question I asked people before about COVID. The governor very much reopened Florida recently. Did he do the right thing? Are we safe enough to be that open?
Jim, why don't you start?
Well, I mean, I think we heard the respondents from the last debate here, and I think everybody's a Monday morning quarterback when it comes to this COVID issue. It's always easy to look back and go, "But that was a bad call yesterday." But when you're in the heat of the moment, so I think that there's some science base to it for sure. I think there's an economic massive impact for sure. But I think most importantly is that local leadership continue to go ahead, forget about the fine aspect of it, but local leadership here, Monroe County, we still require a mask, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that the fact that he's opened it up, I think that we have now geared ourselves as humans to take a step back from our normal life that was less these things, where your glasses fog up, and reality is that I think it's now out of respect, not just for yourself, but it's respect for those around you, and that's the most important thing. So yeah, opening the economy back up was probably a very difficult decision for the governor to make. I'm glad he had to make it, but I think that based on all the science that is out there, and there's lots of science sites, so you get pluses and minuses all the time. At the end of the day, we'll respect by wearing our mask, and we don't worry about the fines. Just wear the mask, and we're good to go. We'll beat this.
Thanks, Jim. Clinton, was it a good call?
Thank you. I would disagree that this was based on any scientific research at all. In fact, we know Robert Redfield from the CDC said that if he had the choice between choosing a vaccine today or wearing a face mask, he would wear a face mask. Somebody on Facebook actually gave an analogy of what if the Category 5 hurricane were coming straight for the Florida Keys and our mayor said, "Hey, nothing to see here, go about your business," and then all of a sudden the Category 5 hurricane comes and devastates our island. You would probably hold the mayor accountable for knowing what was actually happening and then telling you that you were going to be okay. I personally think that our governor, this is criminal behavior. He is putting people's lives at risk. People will die because of this decision. It is not based on science. It is based purely on politics. We're going to see a huge spike in our COVID numbers right around election time. So no, it's very unfortunate. I also don't think that he should take the fangs and the teeth out of our local decision making. So sure, our county or cities can ask people to wear a mask. That doesn't mean that they have to, and if they decide not to, there's no penalty for not doing that. I think by, recklessly not taking care of the public health is what our governor is doing. So I would strongly disagree with that, full conviction. Thank you.
Thank you, Clint. Mandy.
The question for Clint. Hi there.
Hi, hello.
As a Democrat and a political newcomer, how do you plan on being a productive voice and advocate for Monroe County and District 120 in a GOP-led House, Senate, and executive office should you win?
Thank you. Yeah. So for the last 22 years, Florida has had a trifecta government, meaning that one party, the Republicans, have controlled our governorship and both chambers of our legislature. So for the last 22 years, Democrats really haven't had enough say in what's been happening. In fact, if you just look at our environment over the last 20 years, you look at our people and our communities, the results have been devastating. First of all, there's a lot of feeling out there that we need 3 seats in the Senate to tie, 4 to flip the Senate, and we need 14 in the House. District 120 is seen as one of the most flippable districts in the state, our District 120. I'm going to be hopefully optimistic that we might have a majority in one of the 2 houses. If we do not, what I'm going to do is hold my microphone as loud as I possibly can and let the public know what is happening and shed light on much of what's happening up there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Clint. Tim.
We recently, and I know you're both aware of it, we recently had a young man walk down Truman Avenue and White Street to the pier with a gun on his back, and he was allowed to do that and walk by 2 schools because he had a fishing pole with him. Watching the video, didn't seem to be his motive. I would say it was more to sort of test this gun rule. Do you think that rule needs to be changed? And that's for both of you.
We start with Clinton.
Sure. Yes, I do. Personally, when I see civilians walking around with open carry, in this case, I believe it was an assault rifle with his fishing pole, that doesn't bring me a sense of security. I have been endorsed by Moms Demand Gun Action Sense by the Brady, Florida. I'm a gun owner. I grew up on a farm in Central Florida with guns. I get it, but I'm also for sensible gun reform. When we're talking about universal background checks or taking firearms away from dangerous people who are guilty of domestic violence or other aggravated assaults and things like that, these are common sense measures that the opposing party who's basically in the pocket of the NRA just refuses to budge on. But yeah, absolutely. I don't believe that makes our community any safer for people to walk down the street with an assault rifle on their shoulder.
Jim.
Yeah, that was, I was honestly appalled. I couldn't believe it happened. I didn't know about that particular law. I'm not an attorney. I don't study that kind of thing, but obviously the attorneys really know more. But that's not acceptable. You don't walk around with I'm sure it's an archaic law. Maybe if you're out in the Everglades and you're hunting and there's bears and there's panthers and there's rattlesnakes, I got it. But Truman Avenue, no. Schools, no, that just cannot happen. I'm a gun owner, just like my opponent. I don't think that we disagree that there's a right way and a wrong way for guns, and walking down Truman Avenue with an assault rifle is the wrong way, and that law it really needs to be addressed because no one feels safe with that, including gun owners, I'm sure.
Thank you, Jim. Kim.
Before the pandemic, NOAA was pushing some new rules for the National Marine Sanctuary in a very big way. And a lot of people were very worried, especially our fishermen. And all of a sudden, they've kind of become quiet. Could you give us an update on, and this is for both of you, on where we stand with that and how you're going to help our fishermen make livings?
Jim, why don't you start?
Well, yeah, it was a hot topic there pre-COVID, certainly. We did, to many, I wouldn't say debates, but many open forums. But National Marine Sanctuary, in the big picture, has done a great job in the past. But the problem I see with the National Marine Sanctuary's new plan, as we were hearing it pre-COVID, was that who's going to enforce these rules? And they can't really enforce the rules that they have right now. So my understanding is FWC has worked very closely with the Marine Sanctuary and NOAA to try and address some of those really, really difficult decisions that were laid out, and really, in my opinion, very stern and restrictive use of our marine waters. Like, I grew up in the Florida Keys. Nobody loves the water more than me, and they can say what they want on the news, and they can send those flyers out. It's all fine, but nobody loves the water more than I. But there's also a use. There's a private enjoyment to it. I think the regulations that are in place right now for the commercial industry are pretty stiff. But again, without enforcement, you can regulate whatever you want. You're not going to have enforcement. And so I'm a big believer that FWC will work towards and hopefully get us in the middle of a good position with the NOAA issue.
Thanks, Jim. Clinton, same question.
Yeah, so I've actually served on the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary Advisory Council for the last 12 years. I've recently termed off. I was the most recent chair. And so the restoration blueprint was a 6 or now 7-year process that we've been taking to rewrite the zoning and the regulations of the sanctuary, because they haven't been changed since the Sanctuary Act was enacted over 20 years ago. We know that marine protected areas conserve our environment. As was mentioned earlier tonight, in the 1970s, we had over 40% coral cover. Now we're down to below 2%, and our coral is rapidly declining. In Florida, our environment is our economy, and that is no more true than here in District 120. Tourism is our first economy, fishing is our second. So we need to do everything that we possibly can to protect our future, which involves protecting our environment as vigorously as we possibly can. Oh, and to your other point, why is it quiet now? They had released the first version of the restoration blueprint. They went through a whole process, 6 months or so of getting public comment. Once that process was finished, it's now back at NOAA in Washington. They're incorporating all of the public comment that they received. There will be another version coming out probably in the fall, and then there will be another round of public comment on that draft as well.
Thanks, Clinton. I got to say, you guys are great about actually answering the questions and staying on point.
We're good guys.
Gwen.
As everyone knows, earlier this year, the state's unemployment system became a disaster. Is the state done enough to fix it, and are the benefits fair?
Yeah, so that website was built by Governor Rick Scott for $78 million, and I'm in the web business. I can just tell you that's highway robbery right off the top. But it was designed to artificially lower Florida's unemployment numbers, to make it harder for people to be able to claim benefits that they had been paying for their whole working lives. So yeah, Florida has one of the worst unemployment systems in the nation, as far as we only pay 12 weeks. Most states pay 26 weeks, and then the amount that we pay, the most you'll be able to get is $275. And as our esteemed Senate candidate Javier Fernandez mentioned, our federal government was offering an additional $300 per person for unemployment benefits, and our governor refused that money. And I just don't understand why. That money would go straight to the people's pockets who are suffering the most. Yes, we need to revamp our system entirely. We need to make sure that we're putting people first in all that we do. Nobody wants to give a hand out, but we need to give people a hand up when they're facing hard times.
Excellent. Jim.
Well, yeah, obviously it was broken. We found that out very, very quickly. It has to be redone. It has to be addressed. These systems that were, I call them archaic. The reality of it is much like any local legislation that, a lot of people in here have worked in local council members or commissions, understand you write an ordinance one day, and 5 or 6 years later, that ordinance is really obsolete because times change. Well, obviously, times have changed. And I agree, it's underfunded. There's no way $275 a week can work for the average citizen in the state of Florida any longer. So yeah, we have to address that, and you're going to have to reach across the aisles and get that done, but it needs to be done, and I believe it will get done, because I don't think any citizens in the state nor this district will tolerate anything less than fixing what's been broken.
Thanks, guys. Mandy.
I'll ask you guys the same question I asked the previous race, but what state department has the most influence in the Keys, and who do you know in that department?
I'm sorry. Jim first.
Well, State Department. Look, there's so many agencies out there that control our lives. We're a top-down district here when it comes to agencies. There's no question about that. We are strong arm by DEP, Army Corps, EPA, FEMA. FEMA is a big elephant in the China shop. I mean, look, our lives are controlled with insurance rates, so we have multiple agencies that control our lives, and we've sort of learned to adapt to them. Doesn't mean that we like them necessarily, but we have adapted. We've done well. We work well, and I think the key to those agencies is to continue to try and morph ourselves from what used to be in the past to a new and brighter future through agencies and working alongside them with each other.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah.
Clinton.
This is the first time I've run for office. I do not have existing relationships in Tallahassee. Certainly, I would want to forge as many as those as I possibly could. Department of Economic Opportunity, obviously tying back into the unemployment situation. I believe that there's an immediate need now that we need to address in that regard. But again, I mean, there are so many issues facing our state right now, but I don't have existing relationships I could tie into.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Thanks, Clinton. Remember, guys, the camera. Oh. Tim.
I'll ask the question again because I asked it of your state compadres and I did Senate compadres. I don't feel like I got the answer. They got onto public schools and all of this other stuff that I think mental health service. You guys both were here. You both heard the question. We don't have a Baker Act facility for juvenile children. We have very limited for children on the spectrum and other things in our schools, yes, but we don't have aftercare programs. We don't have a lot. What would you, if elected, what would you do to bring more money for mental health services for children and for children and to bring money in for a Baker Act facility?
Yeah. Well, I think funding mental health for everybody, not just children, but for adults too. You know, unfortunately, our system is set up today where people don't get the care that they need until they commit a crime, and that's really unfortunate. So I would like to invest across the state in more mental health care. As far as our children go, of course, I do fully support. You'd mentioned the Baker Act. I did not know that we did not have a facility down here for Baker Acted children. So those people are now being taken all the way to Miami-Dade, which is highly unfortunate. And as a parent of 2 adolescent daughters, I can just imagine how heartbreaking that would be if one of my children had to be shipped up to Miami-Dade for a facility and there wasn't anything closer by. Absolutely, I would try to secure funding for something of that nature.
Excellent. Jim, same
Yeah,
question.
well, I agree 100%. You know, as a former teacher, I've witnessed how children operate. It starts really at the home. Not every family has the wherewithal to have somebody come home and pick them up and deal with issues that occur throughout the day. There are mental issues stem to stern, you know, from young children all the way up through adulthood. Certainly, I think the way to fund that, Monroe County is a donor county for the most part. We donate a lot of sales tax to the state of Florida. We don't get our fair share back. I mean, that would be probably the first spot I would work to try and get more funding, would be to try and get more sales tax dollars back in here for specific use. I would never go to Tallahassee and expect for them to give us carte blanche more money to be spent in any way that's any municipality or the county sees fit. It's going to be very important to preach that at the legislative level and let people understand, again, that we're a donor county. Our school systems, we donate a lot of money, not just sales tax, but our tax dollars from our school taxes go to Tallahassee. We do not get our fair share back. We've all been preaching that. Anybody that's lived here a long time clearly understands that. I will continue to preach that, fairness is where it's at, and we're going to fight for those dollars to get them back. Then, of course, we're going to go back and fight for other dollars as well through grants and funding. But we'll fight for it because every child needs a balanced field and every child needs a chance. And remember, every child is the future of our country in our district. So it's very important that we take care of our children first and us second.
Sounds good. Anybody besides Tim have a quick question?
Yeah, I do.
I do.
Okay, Kim?
Oh, go ahead.
Should you win, what committee will you ask to sit on and why?
Good question. Jim first.
Well, that's a question that I'm sure that Clint has received those 1,000 questionnaires that we receive daily. But committees are, first, it'd be nice to see who's chairing committees and what districts they come from, and do these committees really work for our district and in particular tonight, Monroe County. But certainly in anything with the environment, transportation is big. And of course, the tourism, look, Monroe County is not going away. We're going to have tourists here until it's frozen over, so to speak. It's going to be, so we need to have somebody that understands the infrastructure aspect for transportation. But in our environmental issues, we need to have somebody there that understands. And so I'd love to sit on some kind of environmental committee. That would be my sort of top dog.
Clinton?
Yeah, so as a freshman representative, I'm probably not going to have a lot of say in which committees I get to choose, but as Mr. Mooney suggested, I would probably also want to be on agriculture, natural resources, something that we could make efforts to do more to protect our environment here. I'm also very passionate about healthcare, or rather the lack thereof in our state, expanding Medicaid, and so I would also like the opportunity to serve in that capacity, anything I could do to expand care and coverage so that all Floridians can get the medical care they need.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, it's time to wrap it up. So, Clinton, why don't you do your closing statement? Jim? And same rules applied, although I don't think it's even a question this time.
No worries.
Sure. Thank you. Well, sadly, the pandemic is just the latest and most visual crisis that our Republican leadership in Tallahassee has failed to ignore. However, our climate emergency is our #1 threat that we're facing here in District 120. But still, our state has no plan whatsoever, no carbon inventory, nothing to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, nothing. When I'm elected, I will always base all of my policy work on the foundation of science. I believe it's incumbent on Florida to become a global leader in renewable energy. We're the sunshine state. I think it's incumbent that we finally prove that. I am not a career politician. I'm running to become a public servant. I want to be able to serve my community and the people of Florida. I've been paying attention for many, many years. I'm very upset, and I've got a lot of bones to pick in Tallahassee. I will not compromise my integrity or my honor. Again, I've got 2 adolescent daughters, and when I look at the world and what's happening around us, I'm trying to make a better future for my kids and for all of our kids. And so I'm asking all districts, or all voters of District 120 to please come and support our candidacy in our race. ClintForFlorida.com is our website. You can sign up for various volunteer opportunities. Again, thank you for the opportunity and the questions here tonight. My name is Clint Barras. I want to be your next state representative for District 120. I will work tirelessly to represent you with honor and integrity. Thank you.
Thank you, Clinton. Jim?
Yes, I feel blessed that I've served the village of Alamorada for 10 years of my life as a public servant. That term politician is a wonderful thing, and I've been, it's been going on since the primary. But the reality of it is, I think that anybody that sits up here, if you're not doing it from your heart for all the right reasons, and you shouldn't be up here to begin with. My future lies not in myself, but in the children. I have 2 beautiful granddaughters that live up in Palm Beach County. And I do these for my grandchildren. I do this for my friends throughout Monroe County. I have friends in the mainland. This is not about me. This is about what can we do to make District 120, and in particular tonight, Monroe County, a better place to live and to attack the issues of climate change and sea level rise. We've got to be strong as leaders. That is a fact. I am very proud to have attended every single climate summit in the last 6 years that's been held. And I take that with a lot of pride. And I've learned a lot about climate. And I've lived here my entire life. I've seen flats not come out of the water every low tide anymore. We don't fool anybody. And I think it starts at the local level. And I think everybody watching this needs to go to their local leaders and say, we need to talk about zoning changes and building codes and how do we become resilient and how do we adapt to what's happening around us. I'm not worried it's going to happen in 12 years, but it's not our job to worry about 12 years from now. Our job is to lead today. Our job is to make things right. Our job is to make sure our tax dollars are used in such a way that they're not wasted on frivolous nonsense and in fact need to be geared towards what needs to be done right now today. And that crosses across the board with the questions that were asked from healthcare to climate to guns. We have to be strong. We have to lead strong.
Wrap it up,
and
Jim.
my position at the village council will allow me to do that because I have the wherewithal and the knowledge to understand what's happening from the local level. So thank you. Vote Jim Mooney, elect.com.
Thank you, Jim. But before you guys step down, I wanted to thank you guys on behalf of Hometown for being such great gentlemen up here and serving as an example of
Yeah.
these 2 individuals in this race in particular have been subject to terrible volumes of mailers that would make you guys both seem like terrible criminals and terrible people. That's part of why we do this. So these videos will be played over and over and see that you're humans and you care, and you may not agree with each other, but that's for the voters to decide. But I think this is why we do this, rather than letting people rely on mailers and innuendo and all the other stuff. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Todd.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, hometown.
Thank you.
Now get off the stage.
We should have had him gone first so they could teach these guys a lesson.
It's a long story, Tim. Like, state attorney is our bat and cleanup here. Oh, if you want, yeah. While they're coming up, one thing that's important is, as I got some time to kill, again, we're volunteers. None of us get paid. These things do cost money. Almost everything we do, everybody gets a check. Two important points I would say are, Lynn, kick him out of the way. No. Are that we are no longer a PAC. We are a 501c3, which means all your donations to Hometown are tax deductible. And we have a couple of donors that have foundations and stuff, and end of the year is coming up, so really makes a huge difference. So, no, come on, Dennis. Of course, we're waiting on Dennis.
You think people are still watching this show?
No.
No.
That's why we put you last, Dennis.
Thank you. Thank you.
They are according to my phone, so.
Oh, good.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Are they telling you what questions to ask?
No,
So-
I wish.
So next up is our last race of the evening, which was our first race of the evening, but we're going to give them equal time. We're going to move right into it. State Attorney, we'll start with Dennis. Dennis, introduce yourself, and then we'll get right to questions.
Hi, I'm State Attorney Dennis
You can
Ward.
take your mask off. I'm sorry.
Yes?
Yes, you can
Okay.
take your mask off up here. Start over. My
You
fault.
can hear me now. You can see me, too. Dennis Ward, State Attorney.
Hi, good evening. Donald Barrett, candidate for State Attorney.
Kim, you'll start off here. I'm not Kim, I'm sorry. Gwen. Gwen, you'll start off here.
Okay, good evening, y'all. There was a young Key West couple charged with violating a quarantine order after they both tested positive for novel coronavirus. Mr. Ward has said they should do jail time. I think one's due in court tomorrow. I'd like to know should they get jail time for violating a quarantine order when they were sick?
Don, why don't you start?
Sure.
A minute and a half.
I read about it in the paper is all I know about the case at this point. I think the fact that they apparently tested positive for COVID and were ordered to quarantine is a serious matter. And if they violated that, which apparently they did, at least enough to be charged, that it should be taken seriously. I don't know necessarily that they should do jail time. I think it would be important to know whether or not they have any criminal record, whether or not they had any compelling reason for being outside and violating the order. So I don't really know enough about the facts and circumstances of the entire case to say whether or not they should or should not do jail time. But I think that on the face of it, it's a fairly serious matter.
Dennis.
You're right, it is coming up tomorrow. And they're taking our plea offer. I don't remember how much jail time's in there. The male defendant is in there also on a warrant for, I think, aggravated assault. And he'll be pleading tomorrow.
Thank you, Dennis.
You're welcome.
Mandy.
Question for Mr. Barrett. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
You mentioned in your answers to the Key West Weekly's questionnaire that you would investigate, if elected, the need for a conviction integrity unit to review convictions obtained by your opponent. Can you talk specifically about your concerns and why would you be concerned about your opponent's convictions and not any of his predecessors?
Well, the concern arises from the fact that a prosecutor who was assigned to prosecute major crimes has been suspended by the Florida Bar for 1 year, effective around the end of last year, beginning of this year. Being suspended by the Florida Bar is a very serious matter. I have been a lawyer now for 24 years, and I've never personally known an attorney who was suspended by the Florida Bar, so it's an extraordinary and serious matter. I think it's even more serious when it's a prosecutor, somebody who's handling cases, who has people's freedom literally in their hands. And this was not just a prosecutor, this was someone who my opponent promoted to be a major crimes prosecutor. And I know for a fact that some of the cases handled by this prosecutor are currently under attack. I know of other cases that have been reversed. As a criminal defense attorney who has been opposing counsel to this prosecutor and having witnessed some of the shenanigans that went on with this prosecutor, I feel it's appropriate for the seeking of justice to review the convictions and cases that were worked on by this particular prosecutor.
Dennis, you of course get to also answer that.
You were her direct supervisor when she got the bar complaint, as I recall. And I think some of the cases you talk about being reversed were done by the judges and some of the attorneys that were in, I guess, jury conferences, and one was you. One of the cases that got reversed was the Duval Street shooter, where she beat you in that case, and you failed to provide the court with the proper jury instruction. So then you won it on an appeal, and it got reversed. So there's cases that she handled, and she handled properly, in my opinion. Your guy that you're going to make the executive director first was there when Mr. Cole, when the complaint came in, and sat on it for, I don't know, 2 years, 2.5 years, and did nothing with it. And you know as well as I know that when prosecutors or public defenders get bar complaints, they're entitled to respond to them. And they're also innocent until proven guilty. So I welcome your conviction integrity unit, but I think maybe we should look at some of your cases as well. Thank you.
Of course, 30 seconds to respond.
Sure. The bar complaint against this particular prosecutor was filed and is based on things that happened after I left the office in June or July of 2010. The basis for the complaint, as well as the complaint itself, was filed after I had no longer worked at the office. And the case that you speak about, the Duval Street shooter case, was reversed based on improper jury instructions provided by the state attorney's office, as well as improper closing arguments made by both of the prosecutors on the case.
Okay. Let's move on.
We could go on.
Tim.
One thing that's been brought up in this, and it was brought up earlier, then Dennis alluded to it tonight, is, Mr. Barrett, is the Mark Cole issue. Do you, if elected, would you give Mark Cole a job at the state attorney's office?
No, he's continued to say that there's some sort of agreement that I'm offering people jobs before I've been elected state attorney. Sure hope to be elected state attorney, but that's the first order of business. I have not thought about any particular person for any particular job. I've not promised anybody any particular job. I guess he's traumatized by what happened in 2012 when he was defeated as state attorney by Catherine Vogel, and Catherine Vogel then gave Mark Cole a job at the state attorney's office. So he seems to be stuck on that, but there's been no agreement by me with anybody as far as any specific employment. And again, I think it would be wholly premature for me to even be thinking about those kinds of things while I'm running to be elected for the office.
Dennis, you can 30 seconds to respond to what he said, but I'll remind you both, if in your response you mention the other individual, then we'll go back and forth. And I don't think it's a great service to everybody else. So Dennis, 30 seconds to respond.
Well, he said people are out of position. And, I'm pretty proud of the fact that for the first time in the history of the state attorney's office, there's more female lawyers than males. And I don't know what he means by people being out of position. Like, does that mean somebody should be playing shortstop instead of right field? I don't get it. My chief assistant is the only board-certified criminal defense attorney or criminal attorney in Monroe County and has been for some time. My executive director is a 40-year labor and employment attorney who was recognized as being one of the top labor and employment attorneys in the United States of America.
Thanks, Dennis. Let's move on to Kim.
Illegal rentals of homes through Airbnb, HomeAway, and other internet sites have impacted tourism in all of Florida, but especially in the Keys. What is your strategy for mitigating the negative impact on legitimately licensed lodging establishments?
Dennis, when you start.
Yeah, interestingly enough, this came up at the chamber luncheon the other day, and my opponent said, well, they're all in the newspaper. It's a matter of priorities. All you got to do is take them out of the newspapers and do that. But in order to prosecute these cases, you need a thing called evidence, right? So we've been working with the county attorney's office and the county tax collector in gaining that evidence to prove that these people are renting their houses illegally and that they're not paying their proper taxes. We've got a couple of cases, we've arrested a couple of people up in the Upper Keys for that, and we've got a couple more working, and I think one even with a guy that owes the city of Key West $1 million. So we take a pretty aggressive stance on this, and sometimes when you have to go to New York or Pennsylvania and you're serving a Monroe County subpoena, trying to get bank records, it takes some time. So it's more than just opening up a newspaper and looking at it.
Don.
Yeah, I think it's, as I said the other day, it's a matter of priorities. These illegal rentals are everywhere throughout the Keys, from what I can tell. Many of them are advertised online. It's pretty easy to decipher when something is illegal as far as these rentals go. They need to be licensed, they need to pay appropriate taxes. Usually there's neighbors, or oftentimes there's neighbors who will alert the authorities of the problem. So it's a matter of priorities. I don't think the current state attorney's office has made this a priority. There are a number of crimes occurring in Monroe County, so it's a matter of prioritizing what you want to focus on, what you want to prosecute.
Gwen.
For Mr. Barrett, hi. What are policy changes that you would make at the state attorney's office, or what are do you consider areas of the office problematic? Are there problems you would fix, change?
You forgot to mention earlier when you introduced yourself that you're one of the best local comedians here in Key West. But
Don't encourage her.
I've said since the inception of this campaign that something that needs to be focused on by the state attorney's office, I think not just here but in every community, is prosecuting violent crime. I was a prosecutor for 10 years. I've been a criminal trial lawyer for 24 years. I've handled basically every type of case that there is. And the cases that are the most serious, in my estimation, and affect the community the most are violent crimes. And I have been saying since the beginning that as state attorney, I will focus on prosecuting violent crimes, crimes against victims, particularly vulnerable victims. And my opponent has said throughout this campaign that crime is down in Monroe County, and he likes to take credit for that. The reality is violent crime is up in Monroe County. In 2017, 2018, and 2019, violent crime in this county is up. And as I said a moment ago, it's about priorities. The current state attorney has made a priority of prosecuting undersized fish and undersized lobster. That's his bailiwick. I will focus on prosecuting violent crimes, and I will try to bring that violent crime rate down to make sure that Monroe County is a safe and secure paradise for both the people who live here as well as the people who come to visit.
Thanks, Don. Dennis?
We're very successful in prosecuting violent crime. As a matter of fact, we haven't lost a case, a major criminal case in court. Every case that we've brought in front of the court, we've won. We continue to win, and we continue to send messages to people that come down here and want to commit crime. Don't come down here and commit crime unless you're prepared to do some serious prison time on it, and that's what we're getting. Don't come down here to sling your drugs. Don't come down here to steal our boat engines and our motors and our GPSs. Don't come down here with your gang attitude. Just 3 weeks ago, I charged a 16-year-old with attempted felony murder and robbery with a firearm. 16 years old, significant because his brother is a member of a gang called the 700 in southern Dade County, and he's a suspect in at least 3 homicides. So we take major crimes, like every state attorney does, seriously. Unfortunately for Mr. Barrett, he was brought into this to run. After he came back, he left when Judge Jones beat him in 2014. He left the jurisdiction and moved to Tampa. He came back a year and a half ago, and now he's going to save the county. Well, that's just, he's missed a lot of things here, and one of the things is from 2017, when I took office to present date, we've had such a success rate in prosecuting major crimes, and he refuses to prosecute marine-related crimes, undersized fish, undersized lobster. That's our livelihood. 1,600 families just on the commercial fishermen exist on that. So we can walk and chew gum. We can prosecute the major crimes and the minor crimes as well.
Don, you get to respond on moving away and what you'd prosecute.
Sure. For Mr. Ward to say that they successfully prosecuted all major cases in the last few years is like Lance Armstrong saying that he won the Tour de France 7 times. It doesn't matter if you're not following the rules and your cases get reversed. There was a case in the Upper Keys where life sentence was reversed on attempted murder on a law enforcement officer because of an error made by the state attorney's office. We've already mentioned the Derek David case, the so-called Duval Street shooter. 18-year prison sentence reversed based on multiple errors made by the state attorney's office. $30,000 cost of prosecution in that case. Now it's going to be retried at the expense of the taxpayer. So not only does
Thanks,
it...
Don.
Either you were incompetent or you were unethical when you sat at that
Dennis.
jury conference in the David,
Dennis, that's,
what?
Don, you can respond to that.
Well, one of
Well,
the...
I'm not done yet then.
One of them...
Well, Dennis, you were out of order. So Don gets to respond to
Yeah.
that.
Well, he was the cause of the thing getting
No.
reversed.
Dennis, you're going to give him more time. I'm sorry. Don.
Todd, there's a saying that the smallest dog barks the loudest, and Mr. Ward, one of the criticisms of him is that he's a bully, and that's not the kind of person that we need in the position of state attorney that has that much power over citizens and their freedom. We need someone who's level-headed and reasonable and deliberative, and not a bully in the office.
Okay, Dennis, now you can respond to the bully comment.
You know, when you're grasping for straws, you're grasping for straws. You can come up with all these little cliches, but facts are facts. The fact of the matter is that we are very successful in the prosecution of major crimes and minor crimes as well. You haven't beat us in a major case.
All right, let's move on. Who's next? Mandy.
This is for both of you. I don't know who Todd, whoever you want to answer first, but gentlemen, public corruptions investigations and prosecutions have been almost non-existent in this county since the back in the Jack London days and the Randy Acevedo case. To what do you attribute the lack of cases? Have government officials just sort of cleaned up their act, or is there something else going on in the state attorney's office?
Dennis, why don't you start?
I think when I was elected in 2008 and took office in 2009, one of the biggest cases we had was a sitting school superintendent and his wife that stole over $1 million in money for school kids. We convicted him and his wife pled. We convicted a number of people, an FDLE supervisory agent of homestead fraud, a couple more mosquito control people for that, a mosquito control operations manager for theft of services, people selling, county employees selling iPads and iPhones out of the county hall, the woman that was running Bahama Village redevelopment for theft, Jesus, more. And I think that's why my opponent walked out of the office after a month and a half, or a year and 3 or 4 months. Didn't want to get his reputation tarnished. But yeah, we prosecuted a bunch of those. Successfully, by the way.
Go ahead, Don.
So I think the question was, why haven't more of them been prosecuted, if I recall right?
Right, to what do you attribute that, yeah?
Yeah, I've been in private practice since 2010 when I last left the state attorney's office. And so I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm in a position to answer that very well. But again, it's a matter of priorities. I can't imagine that there hasn't been any potential cases in the last 10 years. And Mr. Ward's been state attorney for a part of that time, and not all of that time. So I like to think that it has gone down and decreased. But again, I doubt it's non-existent. So again, it's a matter of priorities. If I'm state attorney, my philosophy is no one is above the law and no one is below it. So if we need to prosecute a high-profile public corruption case, then that's what we'll do. But nor will we, use such cases to make an example out of somebody and, try to score political points.
Thank you both.
Tim.
And I'll try to make it short, Todd. Quick question.
Appreciate that.
You're welcome. Again, one I like to ask questions about is children being a father. We've had seen some children young as 8 prosecuted in the school case. I know that where the child was nearly handcuffed. I know those charges were dropped. But do you think and this is for both of you, do you think the state attorney's office needs to play a greater role on the front end of that stuff and working with the schools to ensure that maybe the schools are handling this as disciplinary problems as opposed to criminal problems? And is that something, as in your guys' role as the head of the office, that you can work directly with the school district to make that happen?
You start with Don. Sure, absolutely, thank you. As the father of 2 boys who are in elementary school, one 11 years old and one 8 years old, that particular story that you mentioned, sort of resonated and hit home with me, as you imagine an 8-year-old child being arrested at school. When I came through elementary school, I never once saw a police officer in my school. Now, having said that, we do live in a different era now where school safety is obviously of paramount importance, and we want to keep our schools safe, and our school resource officers help to do that every day. But I think that they should be there primarily to prevent criminal activity that might come into the school from outside, as opposed to creating or generating criminal activity within the school. But more to your point, yes, I think many of these juvenile matters, especially the younger juveniles, maybe a little bit different in high school, but in younger juvenile matters, those things should be handled for the most part as disciplinary matters in school. And I think the state attorney's office can be instrumental in maybe making some changes in that area.
Thanks, Don. Dennis, same question.
And the state attorney's office has been working with the school district. Probably 3 or 4 weeks after the Parkland shooting, I got together with Chief Lee and Sheriff Ramsey and recommended that we should go see the school superintendent and let's review some of the safety policies and issues in the schools. And we started a school safety and security committee. And it was composed of numerous members of the county, of the guidance clinic, DePue, they were there, the sheriff's office, the Key West Police Department, Department of Juvenile Justice, Department of Children and Families, the FBI, and we went over a lot of these things. And one of the biggest things that struck me pretty hard was the fact of the lack of social workers and mental health professionals in the school system. And there's a great need for that. And you'll see that some of these younger kids that are getting arrested, if you will, in school, certainly come from homes where there's been problems. A couple of them that I know of, one, the highest profile one that just came out, I guess a couple of months ago, you look at that home life, that kid's going to need some help. And some of these things are done to get interventions to try and help the kids and see if they can get some needed psychological help, not only with them, but with the family. You got to get the family in too. It's very important. And when these situations happen like this, if the state attorney's office gets involved, we look for opportunities to provide that mental health assistance.
Thanks, Dennis. Okay, last question.
Okay.
Kim.
I have like one question for each of you. This one is for Dennis. What would you say was your biggest accomplishment in this term as state attorney? And for Don, what is the first thing you'd change as state attorney?
This should be challenging. Okay. Dennis.
Yeah, I think the biggest case that I handled this term was a case where it was a domestic battery, and we had a domestic battery survivor, and she was scheduled for a deposition with a defense attorney who's contributed heavily to my opponent's campaign, and he demanded her dating and romantic history in this deposition, and he didn't get it. And he went and filed a motion to compel us to give that information to him so he could use and check her out. And the judge surprisingly granted his motion and ordered us to do that. And I said, look, I'll take this case to the Florida Supreme Court, to the United States Supreme Court. That's not going to happen you're not going to shame and humiliate and harass a woman victim in a sexual battery or domestic battery situation. That's not going to happen. So we appealed it, and I got with some of the women from the National Organization of Women, the League of Women Voters, some people from the Domestic Abuse Shelter, Shad Neese, who wrote a amicus brief that was outstanding, and finally we got a hearing, and thankfully Judge Tim Koenig reversed that terrible decision that would have impacted on women throughout the state of Florida. So I think I hope that answered your question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. And it's tough with lawyers, but give 30 seconds to respond to that, but then also, if you want.
I don't think he
Okay, well
called me out
then just,
specifically.
what are you going to do?
I'm not the defense attorney who was making this
Oh, good, I'm
motion,
sorry,
so-
okay. I apologize. I thought that's what are you going to do? How are you going to change things?
So the first thing I'm going to do as state attorney is I'm going to change the culture and the atmosphere of the state attorney's office. We're going to restore an atmosphere of pride and honor in working at the state attorney's office. It's going to be a dignified place to work. We're going to emphasize professionalism. I will put the attorney back in state attorney. It's not win at all costs. Your job is to seek justice, and whether that's to prosecute somebody to the fullest extent of the law, or whether that's to intervene at a school and see if we can help out a child who's having some problems without being prosecuted, then that's what we'll do. But that's going to be my first order of business as state attorney.
Thanks. You guys good?
Good.
Okay.
Yep.
Then closing statements, and the rules apply. Okay. So Dennis, why don't you go first? Then we'll have Don, and hopefully we'll be done.
Well, we've been very successful this term, as I've stated previously, and I'll continue to state, the crime rate is down in Monroe County, probably just over 30% in 2018 and 2019. I expect it to go down even further in 2020. This is just an example of the relationship we have with the law enforcement agencies in Monroe County, the cooperation between both of our jurisdictions, our offices in the jurisdiction, and we'll continue to keep that going and continue to send messages that don't come down here and commit crime. Don't come down here and sling your drugs. Don't come down with your gang attitude. That 700 gang up there in South Dade, you guys need to stay up there. Don't come down here because this is not Miami. We'll continue to do that. We'll continue to pursue our policy on the natural resources. It's very, very important. Just the commercial fishermen alone, it's 1,600 families that are supported by the stone crab and lobster and bait. That doesn't include the charter boat captains. It doesn't include the backcountry guys. It doesn't include the scuba boats and the snorkeling boats and the recreational fishermen. It's a very important part of our economy here in the Florida Keys. We will continue to do that. We will continue to tell people that come here after a natural disaster, don't take advantage of our people, our citizens. Don't tell them you're going to put a roof on and take $10,000 from them and not do anything. We successfully prosecuted a number of those people. The Department of Business and Professional Regulation gave us an award for doing that. So we'll continue doing proactive things and making sure that Florida Keys is the safest community to live in the state of Florida.
Thank you, Dennis. Don, closing statements.
Yes, thanks. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Hometown. Thank you, panelists, for your questions tonight. I'm Donald Barrett. I'm running for state attorney. I'm the former chief assistant state attorney of Monroe County. I've been a criminal trial lawyer for 24 years. I've personally prosecuted or defended virtually every type of criminal case. I've prosecuted and defended cases where people are looking at life in prison. I'm the most qualified candidate in this race. I will be a more effective state attorney in gaining convictions that withstand appeal, in managing the state attorney's office, and in relationships with the community. It's probably why Mr. Ward offered me the job of chief assistant state attorney when he was first elected, and why I'm endorsed by the last two state attorneys, Catherine Vogel, a Democrat, and Mark Cole, a Republican. I will restore a sense of honor, professionalism, and ethics to the state attorney's office. I will represent the people of Monroe County with dignity. I ask for your vote on November the 3rd, if not before. Donald Barrett for State Attorney. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
No.
Well,
No.
there wasn't a,
No. Yes, there
it
was.
was,
Yes, there was.
what was it?
First of all,
But no, specifically, you can't have there was a general closing statement
he mentioned my name.
that he was going to.
That's the rule, right?
Were you, okay, the time you mentioned your name is that you hired him, or you asked to hire him.
Yeah,
You can-
and you walked out on the job after 15 months. Are you kidding me? What experience is that? What experience is that? I mean, he's never been the state attorney. He doesn't know anything about budget, anything like that.
Okay. Don,
Yeah,
did you walk out?
It was 18 months, about 17 months too long, and I gave
Yeah,
a
you and me
letter-
both. You're right.
I gave a letter of resignation.
No, you never gave a letter of resignation.
I have the letter.
You walked out the
with
door.
3
Well, you
weeks' notice.
wrote it yourself then.
Dennis, let Don speak, and then I will.
I gave a
let you
letter of
respond.
resignation with 3 weeks' notice, and Mr. Ward called me a day or two later and said, your services are no longer needed.
You can respond to that, Dennis,
Not
very
true.
briefly.
Rosemary Enright, the longtime public defender, called me and said, hey, Don Barrett quit today. I said, no, he didn't. I spoke to him this morning. Yes, he did. I called him up. I said, did you quit? He goes, yep. That was it. That was the
Well, this
conversation.
sounds like a he
And that's
said-
not the first time he walked out of the state attorney's office. He's walked out 3 times. How can you say you're going to take care of the employees, but they're not even sure if you're going to stay?
Dennis, this is, Don, you can respond, Don.
No response needed. Again,
Okay.
thank you, and appreciate it. Thank you, listeners at home, for tuning in tonight.
Thank you, panel.
And this is why you got to stay to the very end.
Thank you, gentlemen.
So, thank you, everyone. We will see you in a couple years. Bye.